Okay, should be.
Recording is on.
Okay, yes, yes. We're doing this. Okay.
Very cool.
Should we use the camera or better to, okay, for the streaming?
I will share my screen, so we'll see what happens. If it gets laggy, then we can stop using the camera. If it, otherwise, we'll just keep it on. Up to you.
Okay, okay.
I guess we can start now. Now, for people who haven't used Jitsi before, it's a nice open source platform to do this type of call. On the bottom left, there are three icons. The most to the left says share your screen, and I might be doing that in a bit. Then there is raise or lower your hand. I guess if you press that, I just pressed it on, and you can see there's a little icon on mine, which looks as though, yep, and there's a little notification, which pops up. And then there's open and closed chat. So probably some people here don't have mics or webcams. So I will just keep the chat open, and if you just type something in there, we can respond to it. And there's, how many? 4, 12, there's 13 people here. That's quite a few. Maybe we just say hello first. And we'll take it from there. So off to you first on the top left, fellow Jitster.
Who is that?
I don't know. They don't have a name. They're anonymous. So we'll start with the people who do have names, and then some anonymous people can pipe up. So we'll start MKO.
MKO, yeah, that's me. Hello, everybody. My name is Milovan. I'm in France, in Brittany, right now. Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
I continue. Maybe. Yeah, make a return. Yeah.
Yes.
You can do Ehsan.
Hello, my name is Ehsan Azadi from Iran.
Where are you?
Iran.
Iran. Okay. Nice to meet you.
I'm Ehsan Azadi. Nice
So what do you do, Ehsan? What's your association?
Mainly, I'm focused on smart cities, but before this, I was working on BIM, VDC, this kind of things.
Okay, we'll try Raphael. Raphael's Bitakovier is muted, so if you can hear us, maybe type something into the chat. And we'll move on to Cyril.
Hi, I'm from France also, but near Geneva, and I mainly work in Geneva. I am self-employed, and we are a small company of 2 persons, and we are an HVAC engineer, and I am programming on Python mainly.
Okay. We then have Johan Tuckler.
Hi there, Johan Tuckler from Portland, Oregon. I work for Mott MacDonald. I'm a BIM manager for them, and my main role is providing BIM consultation services for facility owners, and I have a lot of interest in the open source of Blender and OpenBIM, because I intend to use these platforms for free education in the future.
Then there's FB. FB might not have a mic, so if you want to post something into the chat box, that's in the bottom left corner. Hit the chat box icon. we can read it out. We'll move on to Jesus Bill.
Okay, I am Ioannis Christofasilis. I am in Florence, Italy. The director of here engineering and software company, and have a lot of experience in using Condaster, that is an open source finite element software for structural analysis. And I'm also very interested in the OpenBIM movement, and we are also working with Dion on a project to use the structural IFC and to establish a workflow for Thank you. I don't know what was this. It didn't come from me, but anyway.
Nice to meet you, Jonas.
We'll hear it from Thorsten.
I'm a Dutch-trained architect working in Italy and starting my own company, and wondering if I should buy a Revit license or try Blender. And I'm very interested in what you guys are doing. I have no coding experience, so I'm not sure I can contribute, but I'm interested.
Okay. We'll hear from Gabri. Hello, Gabri. Okay, we might come back to Gabri. Bruno Apostle.
Hi there. I'm Bruno Postal. I live in Sheffield, England. I'm an ex-architect. I do mostly structural engineering these days. I program in Perl, and I have a project called Homemaker, which is a system for designing houses. That's it. I'm done.
Okay, we'll try, and that's it on the list. So if you are anonymous on this list, you have a name like Fellow Jitzer, feel free to pipe up now or type in the chat.
I think I'm not in the list, but I don't know why. I am Luis Perez. I'm from Madrid. I am a structural engineer. We work we have a very small company who does structural engineering, and we have an open source finite element software wrote in C++ and Python, and that's it.
Hi, Louis. Can you hear me?
Hi, Louis.
Yeah.
Nice to see you also, Luis. Nice to meet you.
Nice to see you too.
By the way, Gabri would be my, let's say, business partner, but I don't know why he cannot access, but it's him, let's say. So, okay. That's
okay. So I guess I'll give a short introduction. My name is Dion Molt. I'm in Sydney, Australia. I have a background in architecture, worked as an architect for quite a few years. And I also have a bit of a background in software development and did a lot of open source development. I'm interested in the Blender community, but I'm also involved in the Linux communities as well, in the Gen 2 Linux distribution. I participated a bit in the FreeCAD project and the OpenStreetMaps project as well, if you're familiar with the GIS world. And OpenStreetCam as well, which is a smaller known initiative to try and replicate Google street view in an open source way. I'll share my screen now, and hopefully everybody can see it. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yes.
How do we, okay.
I'll give a short introduction to BlenderBIM, which is the main thing I'm working on right now. Blender, as you might know, is a 3D modeling package. This is the latest version. I just installed it, so hopefully I didn't do anything wrong. It's a mesh modeling package, and it's used a lot by 3D animators. And I have a bit of a background in 3D animation as well. So I'm used to this type of modeling. And as you can see, it's a kind of fluid modeling system if you've never used this type of 3D modeling before. Most people are in the construction industry are used to constructive modeling, where you model solids and you Boolean them together. And from what I hear, the modeling tools used by engineering packages are even more limited than that, like the tools that they have out of the box. So Revit, for example, it comes with essentially five modeling tools: extrude, a loft, a revolve, and something like that. Whereas this one is the type of thing you would use in Hollywood or CG. So it comes with, you know, a significant amount of modeling tools and a significant amount of various shapes. So here, which I'm just opening up here, is the default Blender monkey, the mascot of Blender. And you can sort of see I'm not really clicking any buttons. It's all hotkey driven. And that's one of the things which Blender is very good at. It's a very, very fast modeling tool. Now, historically, Blender had no BIM functions at all. So this is a relatively new development, probably only started late last year. And we were doing a project, and we were just mocking up with geometry in 3D space, trying to resolve various construction junctions. And we were modeling it pretty rapidly in Blender. And it was quite a detailed junction. We were doing some curtain panels. And we found that we were able to prototype the construction details really quickly. And so we ended up just drawing a huge portion of the building. And we then realized that it wasn't BIM. And so what would then happen is someone would then have to redraw in a BIM program so that they could start tagging things and scheduling things and so on. And we didn't really want to do that because we were able to so quickly draw it up in Blender. So we said, which would be faster? We have option A, which is to redraw the whole project in a BIM program, and option B, which is to just build BIM features into Blender. So we went back and we did a pretty simple prototype. And back then, the IFC Open Shell project had already had a feature to import IFCs into Blender. So I took a look at his code, and a day later, we managed to write out BREPs into IFC format. So I'll show that to you over here. For those who don't know, the IFC format is not just about storing geometry. If I have this cube right now, I can't just go file export IFC. It won't work. It's not like an OBJ format or whatever. It needs to store a huge amount of metadata, and geometry takes a back seat. It's just something that gets added on. So it's less important that it's a cube. It's more important that it's a wall. So I need to give that information to it. So in Blender, I have my viewport here. On the top right, you can see the objects in my scene, and on the bottom right, you can see the various properties and panes, and there's tabs to click on various types of properties. So if I click on the Quick Project Setup, it sets up an IFC structure, and this is a very simple common structure. You can change it if you want. And it sets up a project, a site within that project, a building within that site, and a ground floor within that building. And I now need to label this cube, or what type of object it is. So if I say this is an element, and I can click this, and I have a huge list of items here. Can people read this text, or is it blurry?
No, it's readable.
Yeah,
okay.
I can read it. Yeah,
I can read it.
All right. This is a list of all the IFC classes. So there's hundreds of IFC classes out there. Some of them are in this list, which relate to types of objects. And so I can click on the one which says wall, and I say this is the wall, and then I can say what type of wall it is. Is it a movable wall, a parapet wall? Let's say it's a shear wall. So I can click assign, and now you can see it's a wall. And now I can drag it into the ground floor of the building, and I can hit export. And if I just save that as a test, I've saved out my IFC file. There's no loading bar or anything. It just happens instantly. This might be a bit different to those who have come from the Revit world, where to export an IFC file, it takes 20 seconds, and to import a file, regardless of how big it is, it takes another 20 seconds. So I'm just going to open up XBIM, which is a lightweight. This is also open source package to view an IFC file. And if I click on that test, you can see that's my cube. If I click on the cube, you can see that it's brought across the project site, building, and ground floor. And that's an example of the BIM functions available in Blender. And as you can see, the geometry is decoupled from the classification. And this is quite important because many modeling programs don't currently let you do that. So the implications of that is that I can model quite freely, and I'll just turn on some snaps here so that I can model quite a bit faster. So this is a 200 mil thick slab, and we'll just arbitrarily give it out some dimensions. Some have seen this demo before, but I'll just do it again. So here I'm snapping a plane to that direction. I'm snapping that. I'm saying that's 90 mil in this direction, and I'm saying that's 45 mil in that direction, and let's say it goes up an arbitrary amount, it doesn't matter. There are various array tools I can use. So for example, if this were a stud, I can array this exactly along a particular axis, let's say the y-axis, every 450, which is pretty typical for a series of studs, the spacing. I can then go and grab this guy and rotate him. Let's see, rotate him here and snap him there. And let's create a bottom plate. And we'll take that bottom plate, set him separate object, clear that array. And now we have a bottom plate. That bottom plate is intersecting, so we'll just move that up a little bit. We'll move that up here, maybe snap that to the top. And you can see we're getting a piece of a wall here. Now we'll want to put some noggins in there. So I can snap this here, maybe just arbitrarily move that down here and move that back like that. And as you can see, noggins are usually staggered so that you can get the nails in. So we can do that to the noggins and move the second bunch over here and move that so that it's staggered. And so you can see it's quite rapid to be modeling things in Blender. There's not much. I don't need to go and jump in and out of views and draw profiles and that style of modeling. And I don't actually need to think about what I'm modeling while I'm modeling it. I just draw. And this is quite natural if you come from an architectural background. Maybe a little bit less natural if you come from a services background. And later on, once I've finished working a few things out, I can just go and select a whole bunch of things and say, you are all member elements. And if I find member somewhere here, I won't define it now, and assign, and now everything is classified. So I can select all these objects, hit export, export my IFC file, and there we go. we have our building. Now, there's a whole bunch of other features here. I might go through a few of them today. There are property sets you can assign to things. It understands aggregates and classifications. So maybe what I'll do is I'll open up a file and we can see that. So if I start a blank file here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on this experimental CPU multiprocessing feature. And that allows me to import files using all of my processors, so it's a bit faster. And I've got a bunch of IFC test files here. I'll start with this sample project. It's 61 megabytes. So I'm going to start the stopwatch here, because this has been one of the biggest issues I found with IFC imports and exports, is that they're really slow. So I've just started the stopwatch, and it's chugging away. Usually, when you get to IFC files nearing 100 meg and then exceeding 100 meg, it just becomes a bit of a pain to use them in packages, which can author. It's okay to view them in tools like XBIM, because all they do is they just view the file. But in an authoring package, it needs to convert the file into something that you can edit as well. So while that's loading, for those who haven't seen, this is the BlenderBIM site. There are new features added nearly every single day. So if I click on View All Changes, you can see the work that's been happening. So just for example, 2 days ago, support different aspect ratios for BCF. I'll give you a little demo of BCF later on today. We allow the ability to diff IFC files together. So BlenderBIM is part of the IFC Open Shell package, and this comes with a whole series of little utilities, which you can find in this code repository. I can send the link out if you're interested. And the utilities, even though BlenderBIM is built with Blender, many of the utilities are built as separate programs. That way you can plug them into each other. So it can also be plugged into FreeCAD, for example. You can plug it into BIM server, or if you're rolling your own, you can also plug it into that. So there are tools, for example, to convert IFC data into a COBie spreadsheet, to convert IFC into OBJ and DAE file formats, to extract IFC data out into a CSV. We'll just see if it's still importing. To look for differences between IFC files. So if you've used Git before, you know it can check the difference between two files. Here you can do that as well, and I'll show you a quick demo of that. You can patch an IFC file. So if you want to quickly replace some coordinates, you can run unit tests in an IFC file. So you can create BIM exchange requirements and automatically test them, and it will tell you whether or not the IFC satisfies those requirements. So if you use Celibri, it's similar to that. And there's also a, somewhere in here, there's a clash tool, which does collision detection in an IFC file. Oh, by the way, it's finished importing. So that was under 3 minutes on my clock. So this is something that's quite important, because we often have to work with quite large IFC files. We're talking gigabytes of IFC data. So getting the import times down is very, very important. So far, I think 3 minutes for this level of detail of a model is not too bad. And you can see there's no lag whatsoever. So probably on the video streaming, there's a bit of lag, but on my screen, everything's really fast. And you can see this is a multidisciplinary model. So you can see there's a mech in here. There's a bit of, I'm not sure what that is, probably fire, and so on. And you can see it's relatively detailed. And there's no lag as I just go around the screen.
How do you fly with a camera like this? Let's say one of the problems I had was to navigate, let's say, in the model.
Yeah, so that's something called fly mode in Blender. So if you press F3, that will bring up everything that's possible in Blender. So I think if you type in fly, you can see there's a view navigation, walk fly, and the shortcut is shift backtick, which is just something you have to memorize. So if I press it, it basically turns it into a first-person shooter game, and I can move around and fly and so on, and go up and down. And it's really, really smooth, especially when investigating things. And I can hold shift to go faster, and I can use the scroll wheel as well to change my speed. So I can go really, really slow if I want to just work on this particular junction here. It also allows walk mode. So here I turned on gravity, and I can jump through this void and fall down to the bottom floor and walk upstairs and so on.
Wow.
So it's just a really great way to navigate your model and just spot ridiculous things like this balustrade junction.
Just a side note, if you don't have an American keyboard, you can change keys in options.
Yeah, so that is here, key map. And I think if you just search fly, you can click here and change change it to whatever you need it to be. Where was I? Yeah, so if I might turn on a few more shadow, we'll add on a bit of cavity as well. This just makes things nicer. You can see a bit of shading that's happening in the model, and you can see that there's still no lag, but I will turn it off just for the demo. One of the things you can do is select by a certain type of class in IFC. So for example, if I wanted to select all slab objects, I can just hit select, and now I have selected them all, and I can go and hide them and so on and see all the guts of the model. There's also various types of search features. So if I click on an object in the object properties, you can see it's brought all of the object attributes, the name, object type. This one comes from Revit. So you can see that the tag is the Revit element ID and a whole bunch of property sets. So it has pset slab common, dimensions, constraints, a whole bunch of property sets. It's also got some quantities. It's got a gross area and a perimeter associated with it. So what I can do is I can search on these things. So let's say I want to search for all object type that contains the word floor. I can do that as well. There's a search feature. There's a lot of features here, but I'll just go through a few. So I can search for a particular attribute of object type. And this time I want to use wildcards. So the BIM search supports regex. So you can do some very powerful searching, and you can see it's come up with all these as the results. And what I can additionally do is I can go and color the model. So I've just pressed that button, and if I change it into object color mode, you can see that it has now colored the model based on its object type attribute. So if it has a different color, it has a different object type. And this is very, very useful when you're auditing a model. So you can do things like coloring things based off a fire rating property. And you can immediately spot things which are not fire rated that should be, or whatever. Another really useful tool is to color things based off their IFC class. So if I select everything in the model, and I hit color by class, you can see the colors have changed again. And I noticed that this wall is different from this wall. And that's because this one is a regular IFC wall, and this is the IFC wall standard case. And I can also use pattern select tools, so I can search for building element proxy. And as you can see, everything I've selected right now, if I isolate, you see that everything in green is a building element proxy object, which means that the BIM author has not properly classified this object. So for example, these I think they're probably structural members for the facade. They probably should be marked as an IFC member, for example, or especially these very important big boxes, this AHU and what's this? I'm not entirely sure what this particular object is. But
it's for cooling.
Cooling, yeah.
There we go. Yeah, some sort of cooling thing. It's probably pretty important to be maintained, for example. And so because they haven't properly classified this object, that means if this model then wants to be used for facility management purposes, well, it won't show up because they haven't properly put it into the right category. And so that's a problem. And if I just do a selection here, I'm just curious. So there's 700 unclassified objects. And so that's 10% of the 7,000 that I see here. And that's pretty poor, but that's also the kind of the state of the industry today. And that's a bit unfortunate. You can also see all the names of the objects are a bit nonsensical. They're just numbers, with the exception of a few of them, probably coming from the MEP trades. They tend to do a better job, I find, in naming things, and the doors. Actually, now that I take a closer look, maybe the names do make a bit more sense. Maybe they've chosen to name only certain things and keep the rest as numbers. Anyway, so that gives you a bit of an idea of some of the things possible.
And the color palette is something predefined, let's say.
Yeah, currently it's hard-coded. The issue is that when you get too many colors, it just becomes a bit hard to see. So what I've done is I've just had it cycle through a preset list of maybe 7 or 8 colors. And sometimes that's a problem because you have attributes which there are more than 8 types. But just from using it day in, day out, it seems to do the job.
Good.
Simply because I can tell if something is a color that I don't expect it to be. Like, for example, I expect all ducts to be light green, light pink, and all junctions, flow fitting elements, to be this red color. And I can instantly spot if something isn't. Or I can instantly spot if something is green, and that's the most important thing if I'm checking for classifications. So hope that made a bit of sense.
Yes, no, it looks good. The colors look good to me, at least.
Oops, fantastic bathroom. Okay, I might also go through a couple of other features. BCF is a recent addition. BCF is another standard by Building Smart. They do the ability to mark issues in a model. So in software engineering, we all deal with issue trackers and bug trackers, but it's not really standardized. You can't really move from one bug tracker to another. That's usually not a problem in software because it's just a bug. But in AEC, it's probably a bit more important because it has legal implications. So being able to keep track of all the issues within a BIM model is pretty important. So if I start a brand new file here, and here we are, I can load up a BCF file. And currently I only have read abilities on a BCF file. So let's just see here. I have a projects folder. I'm just realizing I can't click on that because it might show some, super top secret work projects and all that type of stuff. I'm just gonna type it out here. Here we are. Test cases, 0.1 markup. All right. So what I've just loaded in here is a BCF issue. And what I will also do is I will load in the IFC file associated with that BCF. And it's a small file, so it should come in relatively quick. There it is. So this is just a test model with some piles into the ground. And if I click on that, you can see these are two topics. So the lingo is topic for bug or issue. And you can see it's got priorities and stages and authors and all that type of stuff. And there's various viewpoints associated with the topic. So I can click on a viewpoint and you can see it's displaying it there. And at the same time, the snapshot's overlaid on top. So if I move the model, you can see what was there is also shown. And this is pretty good. For example, if you are importing from other programs like Revisto is another bug tracking one, you can go and overlay their snapshots and compare what they're pointing out versus what you're pointing out. And you can change the views and all that type of stuff, etc. It also supports associated files and labels. So for example, a reference link, I can click that, it will launch up this link. Other files as well, I can open up whatever associated file or link. So if I open up this XSD, it will open up in Internet Explorer. Okay, and there we go. So that's a bit of information about BCF. I might show, I won't go into detail about geometric representation context, but for those who know what this is, Blender does support it. It's one of, I would say, the only BIM programs which support this. And the idea is that an IFC model can store more than just the body representation of a model. It can also store things like its plan view, or section views, or annotative symbols, or things like that. And so it is possible to store entire floor plans in a BIM model. And it's just a limitation of the vendor if it's not made visible. So you can see here there's various types of views and various types of geometric contexts. So for example, these might be useful. The clearance one you might use for defining service zones around mechanical equipment. So you can say that this area must remain clear for maintenance purposes or for airflow purposes or things like that. Then you have center of gravity, which is pretty important if you are planning out lifts and construction sequencing. And that might give you a bit of an idea. I might do a quick demo now on a couple more features, and then maybe we'll do some questions or something like that. There's the ability to check the difference between some IFC files. So let's say I have a couple of objects, and I have 3 objects here, and I just export that out to an IFC file, and I call that foo. Oops. Sorry. What was that? That was an error message. Oh yes, sorry. That's a bug I should fix. So if I just open up a new session, it won't refresh what's available. So if I just change that, now you can see that will work. So that's probably something I should fix. So let's try that again. Okay, so that works. So what I can actually do is I can do things like delete objects, add new objects, and I can modify an object. And if I export that out to a new file, and I call that bar, I can use this diff tool, which is exposed in the UI. And let's say I call this differences.json. And I can also select my 2 files. So I have foo and I have bar. And if I press execute diff, now if I go to differences, have it, you can see that it's detected that there was one added object, one deleted object, and one changed object, and in particular, the geometry had changed within it. And if it's not geometry, whether it was the certain property or attribute, it can also detect that. That's pretty useful because on a project, you often get, let's say, 20 new files every week. And you know, some of those files actually don't have much which have changed at all. So what I do is I run this diff on it, and then I isolate just the things which have changed, and then I can just audit those things, and I don't need to care about all the differences. That's a pretty standard feature now. Yep, what was that?
So Dion, can you translate that list then to a visual kind of diff at all, or is it just a text?
You can. Okay. You can. And that's what I'm saying. These are built as separate utilities. And that's why it comes out in text, so that if I wanted to, I can process it on a server. If I wanted to, I can press a button here, which I don't have. I should add one here, and that would automatically select the differences. Or I can put it into FreeCAD, and FreeCAD can show the differences, and so on and so forth. But yes, I can. Unfortunately, I have just changed the diff tool, which you can see in my commit log here. I had it open here. And so that button will work currently because I've just made an update on my computer. But let's just say I'll have it ready maybe by the next release or so. And yes, you press the button.
So that's in the roadmap in terms of visualizing these diffs a little better in your mind.
Yeah. I was using this to isolate it in a different manner, not in the UI, just because I have a different internal workflow that I can't share here, unfortunately. But a method I was using is at the bottom here, you can see there's quality auditing. And in my opinion, I am less interested about what's changed. I am more interested in what I haven't audited. And most of the time, they correlate. They're one and the same. So there's this auditing tool where I can write a list of BIM specifications, and I can select a bunch of objects, and I said, I have reviewed you. I am happy with your object. I'm happy with these properties which I reviewed. And I can hit approve here. And then when a new file comes in, I press the select audited button, and I say, these are all the ones I've already audited. And then it leaves behind the ones which are not audited. And that to me is a bit more meaningful than just what's changed. It shows me what I still need to audit. And that could be a property, it could be geometry, it could be whatever.
Gotcha.
So hopefully that makes sense. This is a pretty involved workflow, so I won't have the time to demo it here. I'll give one last little demonstration. This is a relatively new feature, but it's a very important one. It's the ability to do construction documentation. So if I set up a quick new scene here, and I assign my cube to the ground floor, I can delete these; they're not too useful. There's some relatively basic, and I mean really, really basic features about how to do documentation. So I can create views and sheets here, and it's, if I create a test view, for example, and I press OK, it's created a camera at the origin, and this effectively is a plan view at the moment. You can see my camera intersecting there, and what I can also do is I can create a test sheet. So I'll call it sheet. And if I press plus, you can see it gets added to my available sheets list. And if I just preview that sheet, you can see it's a blank title block. And it's got some drawing numbers and revision. But you can see that it's not filled in yet. It's just a sheet template. And this is all customizable. But this is using SVG. So SVG is kind of like the current best thing we have for an open data standard for vector data. Let's just say it's not ever really used much for construction, but I think it has potential to be. And the idea is that what I can do is I can go and render out a view. So if I go and have this, go into my camera settings and I choose a scale, let's say this is a 1 to 100 drawing, and I click cut section, and oops, I probably should have disabled something here. I'll turn that one off. Cut section. All right. Hopefully I didn't break that. Yeah, so I had some other garbage in there that was not meant to be in there, so I'll just delete that. Just a moment. Nothing there. Sorry about this. Yeah, it's still a very, as you can see, rough. I can use it certainly for that's my test view over there for delivering a project, but unfortunately, let's just say I think it'll be too painful for anybody else to be using currently because it's so rough and ready. So if I cut that section, I can now view that section, and you can see my cube being cut. And this has all of the same features that you might expect out of a Blender rendering engine. So you can put in, it can be as simple and diagrammatic as you want, like a black outline, or it can be full on with shadows and textures and all the rest of it. It's totally up to you. And I can now go and add some annotations. You can see it's created a views collection. And if I create a curve object, you can see my curve there. And I can just annotate in 3D. So I'm just, let's turn that to a straight curve. So here is me drawing a line to represent that particular dimension. In plan view, it looks like that. And I can do the same here and move that up. So now if I go and select the camera and I hit cut section again, you can see, where is it? Here. You can see, oops. Yes, sorry. This has to be called dimensions. Again, this is all undocumented and still experimental. Hence why I don't recommend anybody actually be using it for production work unless you just want to play around with something that's half working. And now you can see that the dimensions are written. Now, 1 to 100 is probably not what this should be. This probably, just glancing at that, should be a 1 to 50 drawing. So if I cut section again, you can see that's a little bit more sensible. There it is at 100% size.
So Dion, in some of the forums you had discussed, or I had read that there's intention to try to reflect these annotation data within the IFC file itself. Is that still kind of your intention, or is that something that's more work than would be worth it?
It's still the intention. The intention is to come up with a way that can store the annotation and also have it operate between multiple programs, so that, because honestly, documentation is half the work in a construction project. And it's not something you should throw away. If we invest so much time into our BIM model, we should equally spend a lot of time into our documentation and making sure that you can query that. So I do intend this to be stored. And that's why these are actual real 3D objects. And that's because you can then store them in an IFC file. So they do have meaning. At the moment, they don't look like much. They're just lines. That can be fixed, add some arrows and nice looking leaders and so on. But yes, the intention is still there.
Yep. And which I think is great. Unfortunately, none of the current BIM programs are at a point to accept any of that, but I do like the the possibility of translating this annotation with like FreeCAD, for example, and you could actually round trip construction documents right between the two programs, which I think would be really cool.
Yeah, I think that would be very cool. I'll show you a few interesting features of this. So let me just switch the direction of this curve, and that will fix this upside down 2000. As you can see, it is an art to do your documentation well. So now you can see that 2000 is the right way up. Now, the way the cutting works here is that IFC stores geometry in a huge amount of ways. So to efficiently cut through that is actually really difficult to do a Boolean cut. And that's what a section is. It's effectively a Boolean cut. And so what my current approach is for everything that's cut, you do a proper section. And for everything that isn't, you just do a rendered view. It becomes rasterized. And I currently think that's not too bad of an approach, considering that if you really do want to measure stuff in the background, that's what the 3D model is there for. I'll show you one more thing. So I've just moved this camera out into a sort of orthographic view. So if I just move that out, I can also do 3D dimensions. So I can go and, let's say, move that guy up a little bit. And now I can cut the same section. And you can see there it is. Now, what's it supports a few other ways of annotating. Now, if I show the source code of this file, what's interesting is that unlike a DXF, this actually semantically records everything in the SVG, so you can query it. So the fact that it's a 1:50 scale is actually recorded in this SVG. The fact that it uses certain annotation styles, and by the way, it uses CSS for all of the line weights and thicknesses and hatching and all that type of stuff. So you can actually cut once, and then if later on you want to change the style of it, you can just change the CSS. You don't need to recut your entire model. So it's and you can do it on bulk, instantly on hundreds of drawings. It's an interesting way to work. And you can see that it understands that this line is not just a line between point A and point B. It's actually an annotation line, and it's a dimension line. So it's all that is recorded in the SVG file. And if I actually did cut through the model, which I won't show here, we're running short on time, it will show me the IFC class, the IFC material, the IFC object ID as well. And so you can actually search your 2D sheets for objects, which is something that's not too possible in other programs.
Sorry, Dion.
Yep.
Is it possible to ask some questions? Can you just explain a little bit more what you're actually doing now? You're talking about making some cuts on the model, right?
Yeah.
You're cutting the model, right? So are you cutting it with Blender or with the IFC OpenShell?
So in this view, this AXO view, nothing is being cut. But in the first view, also nothing was being cut. So the way something gets cut is, so if I go back to plan view, and now the camera is actually cutting through the object, and I can set clipping planes and so on, but we'll just go for a simple cut.
So it's OpenGL cut, you mean?
No, it uses IFC OpenShell. It uses a combination of IFC OpenShell for the semantics, and it uses OpenCascade to actually cut.
So you are generating a section with IFC OpenShell. You're making a section of the model, right, for the plan, right?
Yeah, I'll show you that now.
Okay.
So if I export that, and this time I'll export it to a particular folder, and I'll call that test.ifc. And what have I done here? Have I done the same mistake?
Yeah, I'm asking you because I also personally made some tests with the IFC OpenShell to build plans and sections.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's cool. There's a really possibility to make plans and sections with the stack. That's cool.
There are, yeah, and I'll show you that now. So I'll create 2 cubes. One will be cut and one will not be cut. And so if I go through that, this one will be cut, this one will not be cut. And what I've done is I've exported an IFC file to a special folder. And if I click on my camera and I click on should recut, and I click that, it will wait a little bit. And you can see here, it will generate a pickle file. And what this pickle file does is, the problem is that you need to parse this IFC file. So by the way, this cutting is actually, it ignores Blender altogether. This cutting process is purely on IFC, which means that you could theoretically generate plans on a server which doesn't know anything about Blender, and it could generate it for FreeCAD or whatever. So what it does is it will use IFC to OpenShell to create an OpenCascade shape, and it will cache that in this pickle file. And once it's cached, that means the next time you cut it, it will be twice as fast. And this is very important when you're dealing with hundreds of, thousands of objects. There were 7,000 objects in that file, and that's a relatively small file, the previous one. Then, if I go into here, hopefully you will see that it would have cut it. And so you can see black is cut, and the other one is not cut. And I can set some hatching styles, but none of that's currently exposed in the UI. And if I look at the source code, you can see that that black polygon actually knows it's a cut object. It knows it's an IFC wall. I'll make this a bit bigger so people can see that. It knows it has a material called material, and it knows it has a global ID. And so what it does is it composites the cut object, and the best way to describe that is by opening this. Oops, my computer is gone slow. In Inkscape, it composites the cut vector shapes, which is the output of that IFC program, with a Blender raster background render. So you can see this is the background render, and that's rasterized, but this is a full vector shape.
That's cool.
And the reason that's really important is because let's say you're cutting through an RCP, and you're going to see, thousands of ceiling services. It takes too long to cut through it all, and so trying to optimize this is one of the high priorities here to make it so you can just click, let's create a plan, a section, or whatever.
So next step, I've done experiments with basically the same idea with the IFC OpenShell, and plus test with generating symbols for doors and windows, and with doing also with SVG. So it's working pretty well. You can after you can assign to each object, you can assign some kind of 2D symbols, which are kind of functions that generate SVG symbols, and then you can have some Revit style plans. That's cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool.
To do symbols correctly, the best way to do, the proper way to do that would be to have a particular footprint representation. And you'd have a footprint representation in a plan view, for example. And then you would store, let's say, the door swing within that. I think that's correct. I have to double check that. Unfortunately, very few programs do this. I think Revit actually does, so that's a good sign. So assume, it isn't just about associating the annotation to the object. It would be really cool if that could also be stored back to the IFC file and then read out and so on. So that would be cool to do. Oh.
So you envision ultimately that both SVG and IFC will really be an integral part of recording that annotation.
Correct. I think IFC
Yeah.
stores the association in the model, the annotative potential, as it were. But at the end of the day, you still need documentation. You need these sort of maps of the world to tell you what to look at, to pay attention to, which dimensions to follow. And so that can be recorded in SVG form by coming up with a standard of classes and mainly classes, I would say, so that you can query it. This is a example, really small project that was done, and some of you may have seen this example before. It's changed a bit. This is just a pet project one of my coworkers and I are working on, a set of stairs. And as you can see, there's different types. There's labels and arrows and stair arrows and RL tags and section and level tags and all that type of stuff. A variety of views here, 3Ds and unfolded nets and axos. And this shows kind of the type of thing that we produce. You'll notice the documentation is very colorful. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be black and white, but I am sort of experimenting with a more colorful documentation, simply because I kind of like the idea of really using that 3D model a bit more. But that's just something I'm experimenting with. This is the model it came from. You can see it's a pretty simple stair. If I turn on some rendered view, you can see it's pretty basic. And you can see all of the members are properly classified into an IFC object. I have some experimental objects here that I haven't yet decided whether or not it's going to make it into the final design. And if it will, then I will properly classify it into a BIM object. And I also have a set of views. And that might give an idea. I might also turn this guy on. This is a fun little project that also we brought a laser scanner into the site because this is going to be built into an existing void area. And we scanned it in and we took the point clouds into Blender. So here you can see it with the point clouds. And you can see there's no lag whatsoever as well. Maybe if I just make it a little bit more basic. And again, you can see how the point cloud, this one's a bit rough there, was used to check whether it fits. And there are 4 voids here. So in this particular void, if I move that into a section view along here, you can see that there is a discrepancy there by about 30 mil over there. And that's just what you get with concrete, I guess. This point cloud scan didn't turn out too well. So by the way, there's 4 scans which were done. This is 1 of 4, and they all have discrepancies in different areas. That's just because when you build things 4 times, they aren't exactly the same. And you can see that the level 1 of this floor actually doesn't seem to be properly calibrated. So you can see that that floor is sloping, which is obviously not true. Otherwise, there would be big problems. It shows kind of the potential of bringing in a few different technologies together. And this point cloud can be written into an IFC file. That's one of the features of BlenderBIM 2. I wouldn't advise it unless you knew how to compress it at the moment, but it is possible. Okay, it's 7 a.m. my time, which means we've been chatting for an hour. Is there maybe some questions or anything?
I had a question. You at some point you used the XBIM Explorer, right? to see the IFC file, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this one. So I've checked this. It doesn't run on Linux, right?
Correct.
Not now,
Correct, huh?
but maybe soon because they are porting .NET.
Okay.
.NET is going to be the next release. The core on.NET will be the only .NET in the future, so maybe it will come on Linux soon.
I know, but it's what I see right now. It's on WPF components, which are a Windows GUI, and it's running on Linux. This
not right now, but they're in the next .NET.
Maybe. Let's hope. Okay.
Yeah, one of the things I actually do like a lot about XBIM, actually a few things. The first is that it lets you view all the IFC data without any interpretation. So it's really what truly is in the file. And it's quite easy to navigate through them. So I can go click, 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 and I can go back if I want to go back. And that's very good for debugging. It also has validation tools. So and you can run interactive commands on it too. You can also do that in Blender, but just a nice feature. Information log, so no information when loading the file. Validation tool, so I can click on validate model. That might take a while. It's a pretty good model. XBIM is also one of the only packages which implements the IFC where rules. So the IFC schema has a series, well, basically it describes what the schema can do in Express, but in addition, it also describes constraints. So for example, it might say for one object, you are allowed to assign it multiple properties, but you cannot use the same name in two properties. So you can't give it pset wall common twice. And that's called a where rule. Most BIM programs do not implement this. IFC OpenShell also does not implement this. As far as I'm aware, XBIM is the only one that does. And so it's very good for checking those types of potential errors in an IFC file. Although I have found that sometimes it gives a lot of false positives, so it's important to treat it with a grain of salt. I will demo that Blender also has the console, which is really cool if you're just trying to learn IFC for the first time. So you can just start typing in here with a fresh install, and you don't need to go through all the trouble of installing Python and all the 200 dependencies and whatever you want for Windows, Mac, or Linux. It's all just built into here. So you can see IFC OpenShell is now open. And now let's say I want to load, we'll open my stair object. So we'll go IFC OpenShell. Sorry, can people see this? I'll make it a bit larger.
Sorry, I think that everything has frozen, at least on my side. I mean, I can hear you talking, but the last minutes, the video seems to be frozen. I don't know how.
Yep. Yeah, I can see it though, Dean.
Okay.
Okay.
You can try to reload your web page if.
I'm kind of, because I'm recording, I don't know, I don't want to.
Yes, sure. I forgot.
No problem. Okay, just to let you know, nothing. I mean, you can continue, sorry.
Okay. Well, sorry if somebody's watching the recording. Anyway, I'm opening up the Blender console, and I've just typed in, I just imported IFC OpenShell and loaded in the file, and now I can go and grab some information from that IFC file, and you can see I can just query it immediately. So for example, if I'm looking for a wall, here, let's get the first wall in the file, and we'll get the name of that, and you can see the name is existing wall. We can get the and it supports auto completion as well. So if I assign that, for example, W is my wall, I can see, something turned off here. Oh, sorry, yes, I had it Yeah, so if I nope. Okay, there it is, yeah. So you can see all of the various properties are all auto-completed. And this is really good if you're just starting to learn the IFC schema. You can sort of just read through this and say, okay, it has an owner history. And the owner history has a owning user. And the owning user has a person which has a given name. Okay, that's Dion, great. And it takes a long time to read through the IFC documentation, but if you just sort of tab complete here and play around, it's pretty fast. There's also BCF, which is in there. So you can also open files with BCF. And if I knew where I had one of my files, I would do it. But that gives you an idea. Cool. Any more questions?
Do you have any users yet, Dion? Actively kind of giving you feedback on certain things, or I know I play around with it. I guess I'm a user, but I don't necessarily bang my head trying to produce something, in a job. And you mentioned obviously it's not there yet, but
yeah, for certain things it's not there yet, but for certain things it is. So as a tool to validate and check things in an IFC model, just to be able to load things in, there's also a validate button over here, which checks for validation errors. It is there. I would also say the ability to run unit tests in a file, it is there. So I can audit a file pretty well. The searching tools are pretty good. I've used it on small projects. So that stair is the smallest I've used it on, but I have used it on larger than that stair. So we're talking size of a house. I have used it. But me using it is very different from somebody else using it, because I understand where everything is. If something goes wrong, I know how to fix it. So it's definitely, I wouldn't encourage anybody to be trying to produce a full BIM project yet. So don't, it's not there yet for the average user.
Nope, totally understand. What's the channel like, and just playing around with it, if we're like run into, a dead end, what's the channel out there? We get to kind of post questions or whatever.
So if I go into here, there's the OSArch community forum. So just post a new topic there. I'll try to help. If you are online the same time as me, you can also send me a message on live chat, and we can probably share screens, and that's also pretty effective for solving things. So on the community link here, you can see that under here there is a begin chatting live, which will bring you to the IRC channel, and you can type in my name and help Google do its computer recognition, and send me a message here.
Okay.
So you can see I'm probably online. There it is. So Molt is online. So if you just send a message to Molt, hey, something is broken, then I will receive that message. If I'm not online, when I am online, I will see it, but I have to sleep, so I'm not always online.
Very cool.
Would it be a good idea to feed the Blender Stack Overflow?
Maybe. I don't check Stack Overflow much, or I think I have an account, but maybe. Maybe start with the forums first, because that's where I check, and then if it becomes unwieldy, we can try something else.
There is a special Blender section for in Stack Overflow.
Yeah, Blender Stack Exchange. That's right. This one here, which, as you can see, I've searched.
Diane, do you go sometimes to the Blender meeting on the Sunday, the developer meeting on the chat? Do you go there?
No, I don't. Unfortunately, yeah, I'm not very good at Blender development, to be honest. When I first started developing this add-on, I actually had never built anything for Blender before, so I'm still kind of finding my way around, and there's still some issues with the way I built the Blender plugin that
because it's a good place to make some lobbying, I want to say, for architects. I mean, and around this subject, I've been on the FOSDEM, you know, this open source big meeting in Bristol, and I've been talking a bit with what's his name, the Dalai Felinto. You know, he's the developer of the game engine, which is no more really there in Blender now. But he's an architect. He's a Brazilian architect, and I was talking with him, saying that maybe it could be cool to have the next Blender conference, to have a special architect meeting with you and maybe other people of the community. Could be cool.
Yeah. Maybe post the thing on the forum with the details, and then we can join in and read more about it. It's a pity Yorick isn't here. I thought he might be able to join, but I guess not. Yorick is one of the main guys behind FreeCAD's BIM tools.
If you guys are able to start translate annotation between the two platforms, that's when I'm going to get really excited. Just putting it out there. I think that would get a lot of people very interested and curious, and make it a little more serious in terms of, you know, an open source player in the AEC industry.
Sorry, what did you say exactly? I didn't understand.
Well, Dion's intention from just reading the forums is that ultimately he would like to translate this annotation layer right in the IFC, and at that level, potentially, you know, Yorick could translate that into FreeCAD, so you could start round tripping now the annotation layer right around a model between the two programs, right? Which would be very exciting from my perspective, right? One of the things I'm excited about is trying to find kind of an interoperability layer within our industry. Like the computer software industry, right, has, you know, interoperability in the code itself, right? The code itself no one owns, and they can translate it back between their preferred integrated development program, right? I would like to see that translated into our industry, is that we have some layer, right, that we can kind of translate back and forth between various programs, right? I know it's doable.
There is the BHoM project. Do you know the BHoM project?
No.
Building habitat and object model. You have to check that. It's a really important piece in this new layer. This interoperability. So, this
is what is it based on?
It's based on nothing. It's a kernel. It's written on .NET, but it's building. It's doing it. You can build on Linux also, and it's based on the hexagonal architecture, which you can. The idea is you can have multiple kind of plugins. You can plug what kind of program you want. So maybe it could be interesting to have some Blender plugin into BHoM. So you could also plug Blender to Revit and to whatever program, and it's basically a kernel. It's a kernel with object definitions, and in some point it bypassed the IFC model because it's let's say it's a bit more low level. Is it
tapping into the various programs' APIs? Is that how they're doing the translation?
No. It's really a kernel in the sense that it implements the very basic geometry starting with the vectors, with all the points, the polygons, whatever, and plus after the 3D objects. And then on that layer, you have also a lot of geometric operation like intersections, Boolean operation, etc. And on top of this layer, you have BIM objects. You have walls, you have windows, etc. And then you have a system of plugins that you can plug whatever program you want, and so you can make talk every program you want. So yeah, the name is the hexagonal architecture in the sense that you have ports and adapters, and that's the basic logic, and it's really interesting. Really, you should every guy you should check that project.
No, for sure, I'll check it out. I thought I knew. I thought I was tapped into everything because I'm excited about following the bleeding edge of stuff. But yeah, I'll have to check it out.
Because clearly today, and also thanks to Diane's work, we have the whole stack. Well, we will have to work lots of work on the plans and sections, but it's doable. And so we have all the stack. So now, yeah, you're right. It's the idea is to have a kind of a global. We have to work together to have a global layer, a global communication layer, a global bus.
Allow a layer where it allows everyone to kind of use their tool of choice and not push their data around without any waste or
plus the Speckle, etc. So we have everything.
If you can add something in the forum, about all this that you said, it could be interesting.
Yeah. So on the forum, I've started 2 months ago. I started a website named continuum.code. Well, I start a bit this what Diane also done on the wiki. Start to collect all these technologies and just to show them. So you can go to this website, and maybe I can show you some details also. If you go to Explore, starting to the Explore button. So this page just show you just a Speckle example. If you don't know Speckle, I imagine everybody here know a bit Speckle, or I don't. Oh, so it's making a little bit of time to load. So Speckle is the server, the 3D server. You can connect also various softwares. So Blender, for example. This is a basic example. Then you have elements. If you go to the elements page, there is here just kind of first show you these layers. I've tried to organize them, starting with the kernels, models, interface, etc. And so there is a BlenderBIM, and there is a Speckle, there is BHoM. You can check this out from here. And on top of that, if you can click on the platforms, the above, I've started doing very quick experiments with my own piece of codes, my own kernels, and because I'm very interested at the moment doing like the guy from Italy are also doing some kind of some 3GS. So you can change, Diane, you can change the details. It's a slider. If you go downstairs, there's it's a button. You can change. Not too much levels, maybe. But change the detail. You can go to. So there's a front end in 3GS and there is a back end in Lua, and so. This will be also very important for the future and the future of open source, to have platforms, to have the web, the web part of the stack to go forward, and that's it.
Very cool. So, from my understanding, the domains of things like Speckle and BHoM, they overlap with the domains of IFC, in that they are a way to try and describe the built environment, which includes annotation, but also includes things, everything you see here, like windows and slabs and so on. And it's interesting. I think it will be very interesting to see how it progresses, because Speckle has, I think, the advantage of plugging into many programs and exposure it has from that. So, for example, there is a Speckle Blender as well, which I'm talking to the main developer of to try and work out how we can integrate that with BlenderBIM. But IFC, however, is starting to be mandated by more and more governments around the world. So that suggests that whether you like it or not, you still need to describe your model in IFC.
No, that's, yeah, for sure.
So it'll be interesting to see how these multiple ways of describing the domain come together. I don't know what it will look like at the end, but it's cool, very, very cool stuff. And each one seems to be stronger in certain things than others.
Yeah, and Diane, I've asked you if you were going sometime to the Blender meeting on Sunday. There's this chat room, because I don't know exactly what are your plans, but at some point, if you want to go a bit deeper with this project, maybe you should go also with the Blender developer community to have integrated in C++, in the Blender core, you know, to have spatial windows, etc. Because at some point, Python maybe can be a bit slow, maybe.
Agreed. Absolutely agree.
So that's why I think we have to connect with the whole community. Also in the broader sense, the hacker community around the world. There's so many people ready to help, I think. So yeah, should continue.
Okay. Maybe we'll do a few more questions, and then we might call it, just so that we don't end up with 2 hours of recording.
Yeah.
For somebody who wants to catch up. Anyone else? Nope. Okay. I hope you enjoyed a few of the things I showed. I'm sorry it was a bit here and there. It's starting to wake up on my Sunday morning.
Which I think is fine, Dion. I think it was a great presentation. I think it's fine to have it be a little looser, because it gets people talking. Just, you know, especially when you're on this bleeding edge, you know, it's just like it's just throwing ideas out there, kind of thing.
Yeah, many people. I mean, people sort of asked, you know, what's the development plan for BlenderBIM add-on, and I kind of just build things as I need them. So one day to the next, it'll be very, very different, which you can probably see in the commit log. I mean, it's just look at the past few days. You can see I do a bit on BCF, a bit of diffing. Then I fixed a bunch of material stuff because the FreeCAD community was finding issues with it. And then a bit of stuff on clash detection. And then I did a stint on BCF because I was trying to implement things. Oh, good news on the BCF stuff. I've been trying to propose that the BCF library, which was originally developed, I'm not sure if I pronounced his name correctly, Podesplatz, as a Google Summer of Code project for FreeCAD. I'm proposing that we turn into one of the reference implementations endorsed by Building Smart. And so that will mean that his implementation gets tested with all the test suites. And so basically it's as certified as it gets. So that basically means that every single open source project which uses it, which is currently FreeCAD and Blender, then also gets top-notch BCF support. But yeah, so it's just a bit here, a bit there. As things come, I tend to develop it. And yes, Juanis, I have to get back to structural support. I have a bit on my to-do list there. And yes, Ryan, I am also, you told me before about the annotations thing, and it is something I really do want to add. But at the moment, I sort of build things as I need them on the day-to-day
You're but one man. That's, you know, they're saying. That's the beauty of open source. Hopefully, you know, these things will get some other people to jump on and work out problems that they're having, you know. It's the best to develop when you're around a project, around something that's, you know, needs to get done. It's kind of almost the only way of doing it. So very cool.
Yeah, I mean, every single one of these commits, they were done because it was actually solving a real life problem. You know, whether somebody really needed to import a file and didn't work, or I was trying to produce some content and I couldn't get there. So that's, yeah, I think that's the right approach.
I'd love to bring a kind of an, you know, an open source opening design project, you know, into this framework as well. I think that'd be a lot of fun. But yeah, of course, you know, it's something that only 2 people, 3 people in the world right now could ultimately pull it off, you know. So, but it's like it could be a project that everyone could actually make money on ultimately, you know, and develop the tool as you go along. I think at the end of the day, that's what you're looking for, right? As paid projects where you ultimately could start developing these tools as you go, right?
Well, the good news is that I am actually using BlenderBIM in commercial projects. Admittedly, not start to finish, produce everything in Blender. Although, actually, no, I take that back. There is actually one project I am working on, that small house scale one, which is start to finish, all open source, and that one has not been just Blender. It's been half Blender, half Inkscape, half FreeCAD, half Cloud Compare. It's been using quite a few programs, all open source, but it shows that it can be done.
Cool. Awesome.
Okay then. I just started loading one of the opening design projects here, just to give you a shout out, Ryan. So for those who don't know, Ryan runs a small business called Opening Design, where they build buildings and design them with an open source workflow. So it doesn't mean that they're using open source programs for everything, since that's just not currently there yet. But the workflow is open source. So at any time, you can go into a Git repository, and I'll bring it up on my screen, and view any one of their projects. So for example, if we click on the first one here, you can see the models and CAD files, and you can see these Revit files, and anybody can open it and edit it. And I guess if you wanted to, you could submit a pull request, although maybe you should talk to Ryan before you do that.
Feel free to open. Feel free to you know, fork it and develop it, you know, in your neck of the woods. Actually, I worked on this particular project with Lewis, that's on this call as well. He's the structural engineer on this project, and so we actually use our issue tracker if you go there on GitHub to discuss, you know, the various structural issues on the project. We also use Riot, which is kind of a Slack, open source Slack version, like group chat. So it's, you know, almost the entire conversation of this project is out there basically.
So maybe just to cut it short, because we are going a bit over time, I'll just show, this is one of Ryan's projects, which I had lying around, so forgive me if this is not the best project. I'll just quickly zoom around a bit in the model, and maybe next time, Ryan, you can, let's say for maybe next month's session, you can give a small talk about opening design and the work that you do, so that we can see in more detail. So this is part of Ryan's project files, and I think the part we're looking at right now is not the actual project. We're looking at a bunch of test objects. So as you can see here, what he's done is he's got a whole bunch of, he should be probably talking about this, not me, so I'll just skim through. You can just see a whole bunch of junction details, all done in 3D. And there we go. That looks like the model. and you can see a bit into the design. So I think this was done in Revit. Oh, there's a bush in the room. Okay. And let's see, we go up here. So there we go. That's one of the opening design projects with a very, very nice car.
No, I'm excited about what you're doing, Dion, and along with Yorick, is that obviously a lot of work on opening design is done with Revit, but we've had a number of kind of side projects through opening detail where we try to simplify everything down to simple extrusions, and then we're able to round trip it between FreeCAD and Revit, and so we can ultimately work on our own platforms and translate content that doesn't lose any data because it's so simple extrusion. So anyways, could talk for a while, but yeah, I'm excited. I just want to convey that I'm excited about the potential.
Okay then, thanks everyone. I would propose that we make this a monthly thing, and next month, maybe instead of me talking, somebody else can talk. So I'll post something on the forum, and if you have any ideas or you want to talk about your thing, please come forward, and we'll do this again next month.
Very cool.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Thanks, Dion, for organizing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And one last thing, Juanis, if you're recording, can you save the recording and I don't know, put a shared link up somewhere so that other people who missed it can download?
Yes, yes. The only thing is that the last 31 minutes, the screen was frozen, but okay, next time, let's say I will be more prepared because I also use the Mozilla, maybe Chrome would be better. But anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. I will share the link in somehow.
All right. Thanks very much. And have a good day or have a good night wherever you are. And stay safe.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.